I'm Dr. Beth Molleson.
And I'm Dr. Alyssa Watson.
Thank you all for joining us in the Veterinary Breakroom today. These are short conversations where we, of course, chat informally about relevant topics in veterinary medicine. And today we're talking about what really feels like a big topic now that we did some digging into it, Alyssa, which is owning a pet a privilege? It seems like it should be a simple question with perhaps a simple answer, but of course there's lots of different nuanced opinions about it. So we're going to kind of talk through it, see what our own opinions are, and just maybe spark some interesting thoughts here today. So to start us off, I'm going to define privilege, which is defined as a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group. And Alyssa, I know you kind of went down a little bit of a rabbit hole with some investigation, reading some articles and some research on this. Do you mind to kind of start us off and what your thoughts were as you started to kind of investigate this topic?
Well, I think like you, when we first proposed this topic, I was like, oh, that'll be something good to talk about. It's certainly something that, I see discussed in multiple groups and have had discussions with about colleagues in the clinic before. But like you said, just sitting down on a random Thursday, this is a weighty conversation. And it is very nuanced. I did find as I, read more about things and about just, got some statistics on pet ownership, and poverty, how many homeless people here in Las Vegas, one of the organizations that I looked at talked about homelessness, people experiencing homelessness, and the percentage of those people that have pets here in Las Vegas. It was very, centered around my area, but it just kind of got me thinking overall. And one of the things I kept coming back to was kind of my own experiences as a child, and how I think this has really shaped my views. I grew up in the Midwest. I was born in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. My grandfather had a dairy farm, and I spent just hours and hours and hours on that farm, helping to take care of the animals. It's where I cultivated my love of animals. It's where I first decided I wanted to be a veterinarian. And we would, I would do things like take home kittens, barn kittens. I mean, every time I'd go up there, I'd come home with something else. My poor parents, like if they would have let me, I would have brought home lambs, but he had a pond. I would catch turtles and bring them home. I mean, just everything. And I felt, like
it's a kid's dream.
It was a kid's dream. It was an absolute kid's dream. And that's kind of where that jumping off point is with me, is like how different my life would have been if I didn't have those experiences and I wasn't able to bring those animals home, and I wasn't able to, to care for them. At the same time, I'm not sure that was the most responsible, pet ownership. We didn't know anything about the care and captivity and environmental enrichment for reptiles. Looking back at some of these things, I'm like, I'm not sure that was really the best thing for that animal, but it did certainly, I think overall it led to my deep love of what I do, and my life wouldn't have been the same. And so that was one thing. I'm interested in did you have pets growing up? Like, was that part of it was just a huge part of my life.
That is interesting that you bring that up in your childhood background. And like you said, so many of our opinions are formed in those first encounters or whatever our life circumstances were at those young ages. And I have to say mine is probably kind of the opposite of yours, in the sense that I was in an urban household. We had one dog, kind of because of that reason. My mom, I always, of course, wanted cats, and I wanted gerbils and guinea pigs. And she would always say her thing was like, pets are a lot of responsibility. I can't take on another pet. They're expensive. They're, she gets very emotional. She worries a lot about her pets. I remember her, worrying, is the dog safe? And then we were on vacation. Is the dog okay? Is the dog, just kind of the opposite, where it was like this overwhelming moral pressure for her to make sure her pets, just, she would always say, just like her kids were, as supported and had the enrichment and all that stuff. So it's just, an interesting perspective. And I think that is probably where my initial opinions were formed. I think I did always look at having a pet as very much a privilege. And I think part of that comes from a little bit of a privileged background where, yes, we could afford a pet, we could afford to give it high quality care. And I wasn't really in a situation where we couldn't have had a pet, whether it was health reasons or economic reasons. I look back and I think of how devastating, like you said, how devastating it would have been to have been a child and not had those exposures if our circumstances had been different. And I think for me, of course, when we talk about this topic, I think a lot of our minds go to, of course, owning a pet is a privilege. You need to have resources. You need to, even the AVMA, when I looked at their guidelines, they specifically say owning a pet is a privilege and should be a mutually beneficial relationship. So, they're willing to define that this is a privilege and isn't something that we can all just take for granted, or isn't something that maybe everyone should or can have access to, which I think being in practice is what has kind of opened my mind to maybe some of the other sides of things where I see people that do have health concerns or are on disability or don't have a lot of expendable income. And once you see the benefits that their pets bring to them, I think it really opens up the idea that, maybe the access should be broader than just people who do have endless resources to their names. And reading a lot of these articles, it does get incredibly nuanced to start to talk through some of, how do we define a privilege? Is it a privilege that should be reserved for only people who have tens of thousands of dollars to do exploratory surgeries and hip replacements?
And reading that definition to me, that I was like, well, that shouldn't be pet ownership. Pet ownership shouldn't be only granted to a particular person or group. And unfortunately, like a lot of other things, when we talk about inequity, this is going to come down to class and, and sometimes race, unfortunately. And so that is where, this rabbit hole that you had alluded to earlier started to spiral. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but go ahead then if you still have your former thought.
No, absolutely. And like you said, when you first read that definition, it does kind of, when you start thinking about it as a pet, it kind of makes you, or at least also made me think twice, because you do see these situations where, and when you think about real life, a circumstance could happen where I might, in somebody's definition of the word or definition of the idea of, if I'm privileged, should have the privilege of owning a pet, it could be one health incident or one job loss away from maybe moving into somebody's definition of someone who shouldn't have the privilege of owning a pet, or shouldn't be able to own a pet. So it is really interesting. But Alyssa, I know you found kind of some information too on groups out there that have kind of identified that issue in society, where sometimes we do think of pets as a privilege, and have kind of tried to open up that privilege, so to speak, to maybe wider groups of people.
Yeah, so there's definitely some initiatives out there that I wasn't aware of. So some organizations. There's actually this, it's called Align Care. And it's a program, Michael Blackwell, so he's a veterinarian and also an MPH, and it's this program for pet health equity. And my understanding, and I've done very limited, homework on this, so there's probably a lot out there that I don't understand, but the overall kind of gist of it is that it's kind of like Medicaid for pets. And so it is assistance for families if they, if they're struggling, if they already have participation in maybe some of these other federal programs like SNAP or a similar program, they would be able to then be set up with a care coordinator, a support coordinator that works with veterinarians veterinarians and veterinary clinics that are then enrolled in the program. And the animal would be able to get care. And then that clinic or veterinarian would be reimbursed, so they'd pay like a copay. And then the clinic or veterinarian would be reimbursed through this federal program that, that they've set up a lot like Medicare, Medicaid, with a preset amount, based on the different condition or what kind of care that they received. So I had no idea that programs like that were even pilot programs like this, which this very much is still at this point, were out there and available.
Yeah, that is interesting. And when we think about, groups that are trying to do community outreach in this way, I think too, you've seen a shift from where a lot of people felt like the best way to support animals in the community was to donate to shelters or support the shelters. And I think there has been, it seems like a shift, because I know in Cincinnati we have an organization called Pets in Need, which is basically just a vet clinic that offers very reduced care. There's not a lot of screening as far as who qualifies, but it is, of course, meant for people with limited finances or other limitations. And I think just in the vet community in Cincinnati, I feel like there has been a shift in kind of understanding that maybe that's where we need to be giving some support too. You can adopt these pets out, but unless you're giving people the resources they need to kind of help support them and make pet ownership within their reach and yet still maintain good quality of life for the pets, I think that's kind of been really neat to see that people have kind of latched onto that idea. And just echoing, kind of the research you found, I also did read one study that said, I think it was a study done in Baltimore that said 3/4 of homeless people that had, I might be getting this slightly wrong, but homeless people who had pets had kind of acquired them incidentally. So it wasn't that they went out. Did you read that too?
I did.
Yeah, it wasn't that they went out and said, hey, I've got my bank account, I'm ready, I've got the finances, let's do this. It was more of a, hey, if I don't take this pet, it's going to remain homeless, or it's going to get hit by a car, it's going to stay in the...
someone in the neighborhood passed away, or a family member could no longer take care of it, or something like that. I did read that as well. And again, those, just being aware that not every situation is the same, and so I think, and we're talking about a lot of animals. We're talking about a lot of pets. So there was another study I read, 2018. It was estimated that at least 29 million dogs and cats in the United States belong to or are owned by people who do participate in SNAP or some similar program, indicating that they likely need assistance with veterinary care. At the same time, I definitely don't want to, make other veterinarians or belittle how frustrating it can be when people come in, because I've been on the other side of that table too, where people, especially if you find, they come in with a puppy or a kitten that they paid what I would consider to be a significant amount of money for, and then don't have money for care. And that is a place where I personally struggle very, very much. And I'm a judgmental person, so I'm solidly in the
space, Alyssa. You let it all out.
I'm solidly in the like ENFJ personality type, so I'm a judger. And it's something that I work on quite a bit personally.
It's all right. You don't have to defend yourself.
Well, I don't want other, because I get where the frustration comes from. I get where the frustration comes from when other veterinarians are venting on Facebook and because there is, just like the AVMA said, those AVMA guidelines. If you're going to take on the responsibility of pet ownership, there are some very basics, food, shelter, those things that you need to be able to provide.
Exactly. And I think that's, as much as we've kind of maybe talked about the devil advocate side, perhaps, of this argument, I know I've said it in clinics, and I know I'll probably say it again, where you walk out of the exam room and you think owning a pet is not a right and it's owning a pet is a privilege. And I'm sure that will come out of my mouth again, because it is, to me, it's very case dependent. Because is it, maybe the person that is surviving on disability who had a stray cat come to their porch, or is it the person who, bought the English bulldog for however many thousands of dollars and is now declining your fecal testing?
Right.
I think those are two very different scenarios that might bring out how you feel about this argument depending on the day and the situation. And I think there are a lot of gray, nuanced areas, when we talk about it.
Yep. When you and I had the idea to just talk about this on the show, I said, I have this internal conflict about this. I fight with myself about it all the time, and try to, because there are times I do just pile on the oh my gosh, I cannot believe, how much you paid for this animal, or I cannot believe that you're not going to allow me to do this. One of this diagnostic test, or this thing. One of the other things that I struggle with is I internalize a lot of, it's very frustrating to me, when somebody comes with with a pet that they can't afford the care or can't afford what I'm offering. And I'm happy to come up with plan B and plan C and plan D. And if you're just honest with me and tell me your budget, I'm good. We'll figure out a way to do it. And I'm not going to judge you from that standpoint, even though I'm a judgy person. I would much rather you tell me how much money do I have to work with, and be honest about it, because I don't want somebody going without dinner, for a week to pay for an x-ray when, what we really need is fluids and some Serenia. So, but where I have a problem and where I start to get really frustrated is when I feel like people turn around, that judgment, or turn that onto me, where they're like, I got this pet and now you're telling me I have to spend all this money to take care of it. That's when I'm like, well, you bought the pet.
Yes. And I think that is where so many of us get stuck. And that's one of the many reasons I think being a vet is one of the hardest jobs out there, because every situation is different, and you do deal with people who that does come out of their mouth when all you're doing is offering the gold standard. And I think the question that comes up here is gold standard the only option in veterinary care? And I think most of us would probably say no. And, I think maybe that's the takeaway, is that we do have to have some empathy when we talk about this topic and we talk with clients. And I think, transparency is what would really help everyone here, instead of, when you offer the x-rays or the ultrasound, instead of getting called, in it for the money or something like that, talking through those options, keeping that open line of communication out there, that maybe gold standard isn't the only option, that there are other options, and that just because you can't, for whatever reason, don't want to go with the gold standard, that still a responsible pet owner.
Yep, absolutely.
So we could probably talk about this for hours, Alyssa, because I feel like there are so many different avenues we could go down. But I'm glad we brought it up, because I do think it is something that we deal with a lot. I think it's one of the reasons that being a vet causes a lot of moral distress, is because we do deal with issues like this.
Absolutely. And just being able to, get our thoughts out, and hopefully people learned a few things. I definitely learned a few programs that are out there, or that other people are tackling this and looking at it, and they're looking at it from the human side too. So a lot of these, we didn't even touch on, medical benefits of owning a pet. And there's a lot of information about that out there for people with anxiety, and for people, for children with learning disorders and things like that. So, there's a whole issue from that side as well, looking at it from the impact that animals have on our health.
Yep, exactly. That was another big area of research that was out there was, what are these health benefits? And not just physical health benefits, but like you said, mental health benefits, and
Mm-hmm.
even teaching kids things like empathy
Mm-hmm.
and responsibility. And can we put a price tag on that?
Mm-hmm.
And is that something that we should try to support the community and make pet ownership open to maybe a
Mm-hmm.
wider reach of people than what we would initially consider? So
Yep.
yes,
Yep.
lots to think about.
Back to the top of the episode with,
Yeah,
with our
exactly.
experiences as kids. My poor mom, she was like, if anytime I walked in the house, like, can I keep it? I think she'd be like, no.
Yeah, my mom is lucky I did not have access to a creek or a farm or anything like that, because I would have been just the same. Oh, but anyway, Alyssa, I think that brings us to our standard win of the week here at the end of the episode. Is there anything this week that you would consider a big win?
Oh, I
for
had a
you?
huge win. So I'm really excited about it. So I did have a big win. I had a linear foreign body in a cat. So I was in clinic last week. I was actually in 2 days in a row, which very rarely happens. One of the other doctors was at CE in Hawaii. So good for
Ooh.
her. I know. I was stuck with a linear foreign body.
Yeah,
But
man,
it
that's a raw
was,
deal.
so I saw the cat on one day, and we took some x-rays, and they were a little inconclusive, and the kitty was actually doing pretty well that day. Didn't have a fever. He wasn't painful when I palpated him. He was a young cat. I did look under his tongue, at least I thought I did, and he was even pretty cooperative, but I definitely did not see this tiny black thread that was back there. His owner was a seamstress, which she neglected to tell me until post-op. She's like, "Oh yeah, I'm a seamstress." I was like, "Okay."
Wow.
But
That's pretty perfect.
But yeah, so thank goodness for incredible radiologists. I was a little unsure on the rads, sent them out for review. The radiologist was like, "Yeah, I think we should probably, get that cat back in here and go to surgery," which we did. I watched a YouTube video on how to do a red rubber catheter, trick for the string foreign body,
Yes.
which worked slick as anything. I loved it, and ended up only having to make 2 enterotomy sites. And it's been 6 days now. So, and he's doing great. So I think we're out of the woods, hopefully,
Good.
for any, post-op complications too. So that was my win. It
I
was a big
love it.
one. I haven't had,
Just
those are always
another-
stressful. Yeah.
Yeah, another life saved by Dr. Alyssa. I love it. My win is that I got to meet, which only matters to me and Alyssa, but I got to meet Dr. Alyssa in person. I guess it's been it's been about a week now. So I'm sure this matters not to any of our listeners, because they don't even probably realize, but Alyssa lives in Vegas and I'm here in Cincinnati. We have a lot of remote members on the Clinicians Brief and Plum's team. And so, yeah, believe it or not, the stars aligned and we got to meet in person. So I'm definitely going to consider that my big one of the week, and try not to be offended that it wasn't Alyssa's one of the week.
I'm so sorry. It was the day before this cat, and it was
the
awesome.
The cat trumps are delightful.
It was a delightful meeting, and it was absolutely 100% the best personal win of the week.
Runner up
there. No,
win of the week.
That was a really personal one. So, and we had a lovely time, and we got to go to Hash House A Go-Go, which is like a yummy, yummy breakfast spot if anybody's in Vegas.
That's right. It was a good time. So anyway, thank you to our listeners for joining us, and we will see you all again soon. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Veterinary Breakroom. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. While you're there, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. You can also listen to podcasts on our website at cliniciansbrief.com/podcasts. Or drop us a line at podcasts@briefmedia.com. Veterinary Breakroom is a Brief Media production, produced by Alexis Ussery with sound by Randall Stupka, and co-hosted by Dr. Alyssa Watson and Dr. Beth Molleson.